Hello there, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to our webinar. This is the Pensions module Get Started. And my name is Duncan, and I will be presenting the session. Now, this is one of the webinars that counts towards our Pensions Discovery Badge, which you can earn by attending at least 5 of our main webinars plus our Pensions Quiz. And we'll tell you more about our Pensions Badge towards the end of today's session. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in the webinar. So we'll begin with an introduction, giving you a reminder of your auto-enrollment employer duties and an overview of the main features of the pensions module. We're then going to run through the setup process, so showing you how to get up and running for both a brand new payroll, taking on their first employees, or an existing payroll that wasn't previously using the module. I'm then going to give you a brief overview demo of the pensions module and where each of the options fit into your payroll process before moving on to the further support that's available, including other webinars in this series, how to access our help centre and more. So all of that should take around about 45 minutes. Now, before we get on to the introduction, I do have a quick polling question that I'm going to launch on screen just to get a little bit of background information on our audience today. So the question I'd like you to answer, if you wouldn't mind, is do you currently use the pensions module? So I want to know whether you have the pensions module and you use it, you have it, but perhaps you don't use it, you don't currently have the pensions module, or a final option, you don't know whether you've got it or not. So if I could ask you to vote now, and I will share the overall results before we move on to our introduction. Okay, so we've got over 70% of the vote in. So I'm going to close that poll down now. And just to share out those results as promised. So today we have 69% of you who have the pensions module and use it, 11% who have it but don't use it, 9% that don't currently have the pensions module, and another 10% who don't know whether you have it or not. So hopefully we can clear that one up for you very early on. And for those of you that do already use the pensions module, this should give you some insight into some of the settings and how you might need to set it up in the future if you're taking on a brand new payroll, for example, or perhaps you're going to add it to a payroll that doesn't currently use it. So thank you so much for joining in that little poll, and let's now get on with our introduction. So first thing I want to do is just to run through your automatic enrolment duties. So under pensions law, all UK employers are now required to provide a qualifying pension scheme and put certain employees into that scheme. And those duties first come into effect at the point you take on your first employee, or if you were an employer prior to 2017, it was at your staging date that was given to you by the pensions regulator. So these days, auto-enrolment rules covers everyone. And if you were taking on a brand new payroll, your duties would begin on the day you took on your first employee. Now, those initial duties are to choose a qualifying pension scheme that can be used for auto-enrolment that meets minimum criteria set out by the pensions regulator. Working out who to put into that pension scheme, also known as assessing your employees based on their age and wage. Writing to your staff, explaining how auto-enrolment affects them, and declaring your compliance with the regulator, just confirming that you have completed those initial duties. Now, most of you, with being existing payrolls, will have already done this, but it doesn't stop at that point. You do have a series of ongoing duties that you would need to consider each and every time you process your payroll. So as part of your ongoing duties, every time you run a payroll, you will need to continually assess your employee's age and wage. In case an employee meets the criteria to be auto-enrolled for the first time, or they trigger auto-enrollment. And when that happens, you would need to put them into the pension scheme, either assigning that manually or doing it via the pension assessment in our pensions module. You need to maintain contributions into that pension scheme. So calculating and deducting contributions, making your employer contributions, and then reporting that information to your pension provider. You'd also need to manage requests to join or leave the scheme, known as opting in and out, and keep records of whenever these requests come in. And then every 3 years, you'll have a duty to re-enroll employees that previously opted out or left your pension scheme. So that's known as automatic re-enrollment, and we actually cover that in a separate webinar as part of this series. Now, when we designed the pensions module, this was designed to take away the administrative burden of some of these employer duties. And the module itself consists of 3 main areas that we're going to touch on today, although we go into more detail, certainly on pension assessment and sending pension data in some of our other webinars as part of this pensions badge. So we have the pension assessment option that you would run at the point you've entered your employees' payments. So this is checking to see if anyone needs to be enrolled and giving you options to deal with opting in and out. The sending pension data to your pension provider, and there are different methods you can use to do that, and the pensions module provide ways of making that easier for you. And sending pension correspondence, which is dealing with the communications that you need to send to your employees when they join the company for the first time or when they get put into the pension scheme, for example. And hopefully by the end of today's session, once we've been through the setup, you'll understand a bit more about how the pensions module can assist with all of that. Now, in that poll at the start, there was a few people that wasn't sure whether you had the pensions module or not. So a quick and easy way to check if you have it is to try and open the pension assessment option, which you would find from your payroll tasks. So if you set your next pay date, select an employee just as a test and click on pension assessment. If at that point it pops up asking you to take a backup, that means that you do have a subscription to the pensions module. And then once you've taken that backup, it would take you into the pension assessment. Or if you haven't set up before, it would take you into the startup wizard. Or if you see the message that appears on the right-hand side of this slide asking you to subscribe, that means that your current license doesn't include the pensions module. And if you contact our sales team, they will be able to give you more details and get that added on if you want to start using that. So you can also check your license following the link on that slide, which takes you to our pensions checker tool. So hopefully that's set the scene a little bit. But what we're going to do in the demonstrations for today's webinar is all around the setup of the pensions module. Now, I do appreciate that many of you will have completed this already, but hopefully this will give you some good insight and it will equip you with the knowledge on how to set up if you ever need to do this in the future. And there are 2 scenarios that can apply here. You would either need to set up for a brand new company taking on their first employees. Now, it could be a company that's just started, or it could be if you're closing a PAYE scheme and transferring to another company. So the setup process would be the same in that instance. And then the one we're going to look at a little bit later on is setting up for an existing company that has not been using the pensions module. Now, I think the best way to show you this is to run through a demo. So I'm just going to bring those slides down now. And I'm going to set up the pensions module for a new company that's just taken on 5 employees. In fact, they've actually transferred from another company, but their start dates is going to be the 1st of June 2025, which will be the duties start date for this new payroll. And just to show you what I've done so far, I've created the employee records, as you can see here. But what I haven't done is assign any pension schemes. So looking on the pensions tab, there's no pension scheme set. And the reason for this, and this is something to keep in mind if you do use the pensions module, is that the pension assessment is going to assign pension schemes whenever is needed. So you would never need to do this manually if you're using the pensions module. So I've got my employees set up. Their start date was the 1st of June. This is a brand new company. And in their employee record, there is no pension scheme set. I have set up the pension scheme itself. So from company and pension schemes, I'm using a nest pension. So I've entered a description, chosen the type, and indicated that it's a qualifying scheme. In fact, if you choose Master Trust, they are always qualifying schemes. So I've got the various settings that apply to this scheme, and this is the one that I'm going to use for all of my employees when they get auto-enrolled. Third thing I need to do when preparing to set up the pensions module is to change my process date to the duty start date. So for this company, it's the 1st of June, 2025. And then when I'm ready to begin the setup, I'm going to go to the company tasks here on the left-hand side. And then from this list of tasks, I'm looking for pensions module settings. Now you'll see it's popped up asking me to take a backup. So that tells me that I haven't yet completed the setup. And it does strongly recommend that we back up the data before we go through the setup process. Now I already have a backup, but if I didn't, I would click yes, and I would take one now. So I'm just going to click no, which will save me a little bit of time. And this will take me into the startup wizard. So on this first step, start date. So with a new company, it is the date you took on your first employee. So official start date for my employees was the 1st of June. So that is what I'm entering as my duty start date. I then click on to start. And that takes me into the section for setting up your payroll software. And from here, I have 3 steps I need to complete. But there is an extra step if you have multiple payroll users set up, and that is just to configure the access rights for each of your payroll users. Now, I only log in as the manager username, so I already have full access, which means I can move on to the first step here, which is to configure our pension schemes and set our default auto-enrollment qualifying scheme. Now, the way that it works throughout this startup process is you need to click the Do It Now button. You then complete the task, and then you tick the box to mark it as done. So I'm going to click Do It Now. I'm going to maximize that so you can see it full screen. This is showing me a list of all of the pension schemes set up. And it's just that first one that I'll be using. You can see that no employees are assigned at this point because I'm going to use the pensions module to deal with all of that. It's a qualifying scheme and uses qualifying earnings. I've got my provider's reference entered. And all I need to do is to mark that scheme as the default scheme. Now, if you do have more than one pension scheme, there is a way of grouping your employees into departments or cost centres and then overriding the default scheme for them. And I will show you that setting a little bit later on in the webinar. So I'm going to save this step as I've now selected my default scheme, and I can now tick the box to mark that step as done. Next thing it's asking me to do is to configure pay elements. So this is where we are checking that the appropriate pay elements are included in qualifying earnings. So if I click Do It Now, that's going to list all of my payments and deductions. And the ones that are subject to tax and national insurance should be automatically marked as qualifying earnings. And these generally do count towards qualifying earnings. So things like overtimes, commissions and bonuses are all qualifying. But anything not subject to tax and national insurance by default isn't part of the qualifying earnings. So I'm happy with these settings. Nothing needs to change here. This all counts towards qualifying earnings. So I'm just going to save this screen and then mark that second step complete. Third thing I need to do is to flag any employees who do not ordinarily work in the UK as a non-UK worker, as this will then exclude them from auto-enrollment activity. So if I click Do It Now, it lists all of my employees, and actually all of them do work in the UK. And you can follow these links if you need more information on exactly what that means. So none of these are excluded on the basis that they don't work in the UK. So we're going to leave all of those cleared. I'm going to click on to save and then tick the box. So those are the main setup steps complete. And when I click on to next, It then suggests that I send an introduction letter. Now, you used to be able to do this from the Pension Help Centre, but it's now actually found in reports. So for this particular step, all you need to do is mark it as done by ticking this box. And then if you do want to run the introduction letter, you can do that from the reports menu. So I've got it ticked. I click onto next, tells me I'm all done. And then if I click onto finish, that's the pensions module set up. Now I can go back into my settings at this point, and rather than take me through that startup wizard, it takes me into the pensions module settings where it's got the duty start date that I entered. It's got my default auto enrolment scheme. There are some postponement options and exceptions to the default scheme, which I'll come back to on the next demo. And then we've got some buttons to deal with worker postponement. If you're choosing to postpone auto enrolment from your duty start date, there's some re-enrollment settings that we cover in our re-enrollment webinar. And then there's this option for phasing settings. And what this does is it runs a quick check to make sure that your pension schemes are meeting the minimum requirements in terms of minimum contributions. So they came in actually in 2019. It's detected that all of our schemes meet these requirements. So I can tick this box and click OK and go ahead and save those settings. Last thing to show you, if you want to print an introduction letter or a brand new payroll, you can select your employees and go into reports. If you select the employee folder on the left-hand side, you'll find here you've got automatic enrolment, employee introduction letter. And this could be either printed or emailed and sent to your employees, just giving a bit of an overview on what auto enrolment is and what they can expect. So this was designed for businesses that were staging for auto enrolment when this was new legislation. So you might choose not to send this. It's certainly not one of the mandatory communications. So that was setting up for a new company. I'm just going to quickly recap those steps, and we've got this obviously in the handout as well. So from the pensions module settings, the first thing we did was confirm our duty start date, which was the date we took on our first employee, if it's a new company. We then went through the steps to set up your payroll software. So that was choosing the default auto enrolment scheme, checking your pay elements are correctly flagged as qualifying earnings, and flagging any non-UK workers, if applicable. And then that third step, optional step, is to inform your employees. And that introduction letter, if you do want to run it, is available from reports and then employee. So that's kind of the easier of the two routes. But what I also want to show you is the setup process for an existing company. So this is a payroll that you've been doing auto enrolment manually for up until now, and perhaps you do want to start using the pensions module for them. Or you may have switched from another payroll provider to Sage. You've got the pensions module included in your subscription, and you want to set up for some existing stuff that already work for you. So same format as before, I'm going to run through the demo and then I will recap the steps. So for this one, I'm just going to switch to a different payroll that I've got set up with some existing employees in. I am just going to set my next pay date. So this is the period that I want to start using the pensions module. So as you can see, I do have some existing employees for this one. And when we do the setup for an existing company, we are going to need to provide some information on each employee's automatic enrolment history. So you are going to need to refer to some of your manual records in terms of the history of when employees went into pension schemes, when they opted out, if applicable, and kind of the reasons for this. So first thing I'm going to do is head to my company tasks where we were before. I'm going to go into the pensions module settings. This time I am going to take a backup just in case I need to undo any of the setup steps. So You could rename this backup if you wanted to. We call it Pensions Module Setup. And that just gives me a point to go back to if something went wrong during the setup and I want to start again. Now, this time it's asking me for my duties start date. And at this point, I need to put the original duty start date, whether that was my staging date up to 2017, or if I'm a more recent employer, the date that I took on my first employee. And keep in mind, you may have done some re-enrollment since that original date, but for this setup, it is that original date that you would enter. So in my example, I took on my first employee in 2023 on the 1st of April. So that is going to be my duties start date. And when I click on to start, because that was in the past, it's just going to ask me, what have you done between then and today? And the option that applies to us is that we've assessed employees manually using another system. Now, if you hadn't assessed your employees and you've just not done any of your auto-enrollment duties since that staging date, that's when you need to be in contact with the pensions regulator and find out what action you need to take. But in this scenario, we have been doing it, we've just been doing it manually. So I click on to continue. There's just a warning here saying that it's my responsibility to ensure the information entered is accurate. I'm going to tick the box and click continue. And then it starts us off with the same steps that we saw before. So I'm going to choose my default auto-enrollment scheme. So again, it's scheme number 1 in this example. And that's the scheme that I'm going to enroll employees into at the point they become eligible. I'm going to check my pay element settings. So I've just got the 3 and they all count towards qualifying earnings. And just like before, I don't have any non-UK workers. So auto-enrollment rules do apply to all of these. So that's just as we would have done for a new company, and that's that first section complete. Now, next up, we need to fill in some of the gaps about what happened in the past. So this is tell us more about your employees. It does sort of mention ballpark, it might take around 30 minutes to complete. It really does depend on how readily available your records are and how many employees you have. So we're going to do it a lot quicker than that. I'm going to click on to do it now. And it's just telling me here that if I need to make changes to what I'm entering here, I would need to restore a backup of your data. So if you didn't take a backup before you started, I would definitely recommend cancelling out of the setup process now and taking that backup just so you've got a point to return to if you need it. So again, I'm going to maximize this screen so you can see it a bit more clearly. And the first thing it's asking me to do is it's asking me about employees with no automatic enrollment pension history. In other words, employees that don't have an active qualifying pension scheme assigned to them. So we need to state the reason why that is for each of these employees. And I know that employee 2 was auto-enrolled back on our duty start date, but they opted out very soon after that, and that's why they are not currently in the pension. Now, for the other employees, I know that they haven't opted out or left. They're not currently postponed. So neither of those options apply to them. And most likely, they're employees that don't meet the criteria to be auto-enrolled. So it's not that they've opted out or they're postponed. And that's why we've chosen neither for the rest of them. The next step shows us employees who do have an active qualifying pension scheme. So it knows when they joined the scheme from the pension settings, and it's asking us how they ended up in that scheme. So were they auto-enrolled? Did they ask to opt in? Had they already joined before the duty start date, or was it contractual enrollment? And in this case, I know that for all of these employees, they were auto-enrolled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tick them all. I'm going to click auto-enrolled at the bottom, and that is going to apply that status to each of these employees. And you can also see that it's copied the join date as the employee's active membership achieve date. The next step is asking for information for employees who have left a pension scheme. So 2 of my employees have left. Employee 2 left at the original duty start date. So I need to fill in what scheme they were actually in at the time. When they joined it, it's 1st of April 2023. The fact that they opted out and when they did that. If you don't know exactly, you can just put an estimate here. We know that they opted out. And I also have another employee who has got a pension scheme assigned with both a join and a leave date. They left again because they opted out, and it's auto-populated the date they did that. So that's information about employees who have left. Finally, if you did say that anyone was postponed for any reason, it would ask you how they came to become postponed. Usually it would be because they were an eligible job holder, but it might have been a pay spike. But we don't have any employees to show for this option. So I'm going to click next again. And then we get a summary saying that these employees need to be assessed to see if they need to go into a scheme. We've got 4 that are already in the scheme, who are all auto-enrolled, and we have 2 that are not in the scheme anymore. And we've said that's because they opted out. So if you're happy with that information, you'd click on to save. You can print a summary of what you're seeing on screen here. I'm just going to go ahead and click finish, and then I can mark that step as done. So this is the one that's going to take the time. And like I say, you're going to need to find the dates, for example, of when they joined and left pension schemes. But once you've got that set up, it means that the pensions module can start taking care of everything moving forward. Final step is to deal with any historical letters and pension data. It's just letters in this example. So it's asking me to send pension correspondence. And when I click do it now, it's just showing me the enrolment letters or job holder letters that would have been sent to the 4 employees that are in my pension scheme. Now, what you need to do here ideally is just to record the date or the approximate date that these communications were sent. So I do have 3 employees who were all enrolled on my duty start date. I'm just going to put the same date as the sent on date, just for these historical letters. I'm going to say that the user sent them at the time, and then we can use the show as sent option, which marks them as sent, but it doesn't actually print them out. So when I click show as sent, that was the first 3, because they would all have been sent on the same date. And then also this last employee, they joined a bit later on. So I can fill in that information and also show that letter as sent. So we now have some historical information stored about when those job holder letters kind of originally went out, and it's grouped it by the date that we've marked them as sent. So that's the final step to complete in the setup process. I can then click on to finish. This will now allow me to go into my pensions module settings. So quick check of the duty start date, the default auto enrolment scheme. Now for this payroll, I have organized my directors into a specific department. And for any director that needs to be auto enrolled, I want to put them into a different scheme. So if you set that you've grouped your employees, you can add an exception. So for my directors department, I can choose my directors pension scheme. So that's a way of using different schemes when it comes to auto enrollment using the pensions module. And just checking my phase-in settings. So this is just checking that your schemes meet the minimum requirements, which they do. So I can go ahead and save these settings. So that is everything set up for an existing company. Just to recap those steps, and again, this is on the handout for you. You start by confirming your original duty start date. So either your staging date, if you had one, or the date you took on your first employee, if that was since around 2017. Tell us what you've done so far. You choose the option, I assessed your employees manually using another system. You've then got the same setup steps as you have for a new company. So choosing a default auto-enrollment scheme, checking pay elements and flagging non-UK workers. And then there's the step where you're filling in the gaps. Tell us more about your employees. So it'll start with anyone without any auto-enrollment pension history. So say whether they've opted out, are postponed, or neither. You then say how people who are in a pension scheme ended up in that scheme. And for those that have left a pension scheme, that was because they opted out. You can mark them as opted out so that they don't get put back in until your next re-enrollment date. The final step there is catching up on historical letters and data. So it's recording these as sent, working through recording the kind of approximate date or the exact date, if you know it, that those original communications were sent to them. And that then lets us into the pensions module setting, where you can view your duty start date and your default auto-enrollment scheme. You can set up exceptions to that default scheme. And then there's also options for setting default postponement periods. If you want the postponement date for employees you're postponing to be set to either the next pay reference period or the latest possible pay reference period. But again, we cover that in more detail in our other webinars. And re-enrollment settings, if you come to our re-enrollment webinar, you will find out more about those. So that was all about really the setup of the pensions module. And I just want to finish by explaining where you go from here. So where do the pensions module options fit into your payroll process? And a bit of a brief overview about what each one does, and with more detail on that in our other webinars in this series. So all of the pensions module options can be found from your payroll tasks or from the process map. We've got a couple of pre-update tasks. So there is an option to import pension updates, and that can be used if you've set up pensions data exchange, which is one of the ways of sending pension data to your provider. And the main step before you've updated records in terms of the pensions module is the pension assessment. So you would run that immediately after you enter the payments. Once you've produced your reports and updated records, your post-update tasks involve sending pension data to your provider, reviewing pension payments, so you can run a report that tells you what your pension payments will be, and then dealing with pension correspondence, so any new letters that might need to be sent out. So to give you a flavour of how this fits into the payroll process, I'm going to run some of these options for my next pay date. So let's rejoin the demo. Heading back to my payroll tasks, already got my next pay date set. And for this pay date, I have taken on a new starter. It's going to be paid for the first time. So one of the things I'd expect to see is that they're going to be put into the pension scheme if they are eligible. So at this stage, I've entered my employees' payments. So I'm happy that the current payments are entered. I can then move on to the pension assessment. So first thing, so it's going to ask us to take a backup. We strongly recommend that you do that when prompted to do so. So that way you've got a point to refer back to. And once you've taken your backup, that's when you go into the pension assessment screen. And that's going to show you lots of information about an employee's auto-enrollment status, their worker category. And at the top here, it gives you the option for managing opt-ins, opt-outs, and postponement. The first time you do this after setup, you will see a number of flags indicating that employees have been auto-enrolled. But actually, in this example, that happened historically. It's just the first time in the program that they've been marked as auto-enrolled in this way. So hovering over the status, you can see for most of these, they were enrolled on that historical date. But I do have one employee who's a new starter, who's met the criteria to be enrolled. And kind of the main thing that the pension assessment does is it identifies them, puts them into a pension scheme and sets their date. and then it's going to facilitate all the other tasks. So things like writing to that employee, sending their enrollment details to the provider. So this is a screen that you would go into each pay period. And if you can join us tomorrow for our pension assessment session, Alice will go into a lot more detail on how this all works. When you've completed your pension assessment, you would run your pay slips and reports in the usual way. You would then need to update your records, which I'm going to do very quickly there. You would send your full payment submission in the usual way. And then the other options that you would have access to here involve sending pension data to your provider, printing the pensions report, which will show you how much you'd need to pay over to your provider. And then this one that I'm going to bring up on screen, sending pension correspondence, will show you any letters that need to be sent out. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this one is this will also come up with some historical letters the first time you run this after setup. So for everyone except employee 10, who's a new starter, these letters have already been sent. So again, the first time you run this option after setup, you'll need to sort of enter some dates about when these letters were sent. So I'm saying that these general notices were sent on the staging date. And then I've got a few more for some more recent employees. And these were letters that were sent out when they first started. So this is because the pensions module wasn't used initially. That's why those general notices come up. But moving forward, the only letters that would be required to be sent are things like general notices for any new starter and job holder letters, which is what you send to employees being put into the scheme. So these can be printed or emailed if you're using email settings. You record the date on which the communication is sent, whether that's on pay date or any other date. And if you use the send option rather than show as sent, that will then allow you to actually print or email them. In my case, they'll be printed, and then those letters can then be given out to the relevant employees. So that also saves a copy of the letter attached to the employee record. It just helps you keep on top of those communications duties and also kind of keeping records. So that in a nutshell is where the pensions module options fit in. And just to summarize what each option does, the pension assessment identifies the eligible staff and puts them into the pension scheme if they're not already in one or haven't opted out. It helps you process opt-in, opt-outs and refunds for employees that join or leave the scheme. And it gives you options to manage postponement should you choose to delay an employee's enrolment for any reason. With Send Pension Data, we're going to cover this more in our other webinar. If you've got a supported pension provider, that's Nest, People's Pension or Smart Pensions, you can use Pensions Data Exchange to submit information directly to those providers. If you're with any other provider, we can give you a bespoke report that allows you to create upload files that you would then upload to that provider's portal. So they are based on the exact specification for that specific provider. And then sending pension correspondence, just seen that briefly. You can print or email pension letters. So that's general notices, enrolment letters, postponement letters, if you ever postpone someone's enrolment, and re-enrolment letters every 3 years. And that keeps the audit trail of what letters have been sent. And that all ties back to kind of those ongoing duties that we looked at the start of the webinar. So that has brought us to the end of today's demo. As I say, there is more detail on some of what we've seen today in some of our other sessions. So let's take a look at the upcoming webinars for our Pensions Discovery webinar series. So we've just completed Pensions module Get Started, and the pension assessment and Send Pension Data sessions are also focused on the pensions module and getting the most out of that. So do sign up to the sessions available, and if you can attend at least 5 of the different webinars plus the pensions quiz, you would qualify for our digital badge. And to tell you a little bit more about that badge, I have a quick video message from our colleague Matt, who's going to tell you all about it. So I'm just going to play that now, then I'll be back with you with some of the other further support.
Get ready to earn your pension discovery badge with Sage 50 Payroll. Join us this June for our fantastic new webinar series, where you'll learn everything you need to know about pensions to get you ready to confidently process pensions for your employees. With 7 live sessions and a fun learning quiz in the last session. Whether you're new to pensions or a dab hand, we have something for everyone. Here is what we've got lined up for you. Make a strong start to your pension processing with foundational knowledge on the basics of pensions and salary sacrifice pensions in Sage 50 Payroll. Explore how pension contributions are calculated and how your employees are assessed for automatic enrolment. We'll also take you through our 3 most popular sessions: navigating enrolment, getting started with pensions module, and using pensions data exchange to send your pension data to your provider with ease. And lastly, backed by popular demand, test your knowledge with our Pensions Discovery Quiz to see what you've learned across the sessions. Now, how do you get your hands on your Pensions Discovery digital badge? Simply attend 5 out of 7 of the live sessions and our quiz to earn your badge. And don't forget, you get free access to our new Accredible portal to manage your badges, so you can quickly and easily share your badge on socials for everyone to see. Don't miss out. Secure your spot and join us for an unforgettable learning experience this June by signing up at sage.co.uk/webinars. We'll see you there.
So that was a little bit more on our pensions badge there from Matt. So sign up to any of those sessions that you would like to join us with. That's all at sage.co.uk/webinars. Just to let you know about some of the other further support, you can access our help centre at sage.co.uk/help, or by clicking the help centre or the help icon in your software. And in addition to that, we have a range of courses available on Sage University. You can sign up for that at sageu.com. So I've had a quick check on the questions. It looks like we've got answers out to most of them already, but myself and Alice will stick around a few more minutes just in case there are any last minute questions that pop through. If you'd like a copy of our handouts from today's session, do get them downloaded now before we close it down. And just to let you know that you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's session, and you'll also see a survey pop up as you exit the webinar today. So if you do have any feedback on today's session, I would love you to tell me more by completing that survey and submitting those results. So with that said, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us at the webinar today. I hope you've gained some valuable insight and picked up some tips in that webinar. Do join us for pension assessment and send pension data, also taking place this week. So on behalf of myself and Alice, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on some of our other webinars in the future. It's goodbye for now.